Hello viewers, welcome to English for my world. Well, in this world of information technology and in this information technology explosion, the habit of reading is waning or disappearing. We hardly find readers, or we hardly find people who spend quality time in reading. Olden days, when people wanted entertainment, when people wanted a change from the routine, from the daily activities, their respite was reading novels, reading newspapers, reading magazines. So this was their favorite pastime. They loved reading, so they read a lot. Therefore, the standard of their language, the expressions that they use, their writing skills, their spoken skills, all the skills were different, including their listening and reading skills. Well, we know very well that for listening, speaking, reading, writing, the three components that are extremely important are vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation. So if we say the foundation is grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation, the first floor, second floor, third floor and fourth floor, these floors are listening, speaking, reading, writing. If one needs to acquire good reading skills, one should practice reading. Well, everybody says read, 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 but no one says how to read. Unless we get the motivation, unless we get the interest, unless we get the kind of love for reading, we don't find the real pleasure in reading something. So this session is exclusively a session to boost the interest in reading, a session to help you know the importance of these reading skills, how to develop, what are the tips and techniques. So this session is all about that. A writer writes a text and a reader decodes the text. Reading is a triangular process. A writer encodes his ideas, views and opinions in his language, and the reader decodes the views expressed by the writer according to his understanding. So in the process, the reader brings his background knowledge to the text that he reads. It can be a story, it can be a novel, it can be a letter, it can be an article in a newspaper, it can be anything. So the background knowledge is always brought to the context of reading. That's the reason we have different kinds of reading. Well, we know that listening and reading are receptive skills. People also call them as passive skills, but instead of calling them as passive skills, these are receptive skills. We receive the information. In terms of speaking and writing, these are productive skills. We produce a piece of writing, or we produce a talk. So when we say this is a receptive skill, reading is a receptive skill, we have top-down reading, we also have bottom-up reading. Just like in listening we have top-down listening and bottom-up listening, in reading also we have these two types of reading. A mature reader, a proficient reader, he reads the text by using the top-down reading skills. His eyes sweep through the lines. His eyes, they take bigger chunks at one go. The reading is not bumpy. The reading is not jerky. It's very smooth, as if sweeping. And the reading happens productively, fruitfully. Whereas a reader who is not very proficient, who is not very mature, he uses bottom-up reading. Well, in bottom-up reading, he takes some time to understand the words. He might also read the words in bits and pieces, because each word he has to make meaning of each word mentioned in the text, mentioned in the lines, mentioned in the article. So, I would like to begin this with a triangular diagram that says it is a, as I told you, writer, text, reader. Writer encodes it, reader decodes it. So, in this triangular diagram, writer encodes the text and the reader decodes it according to his understanding. His understanding. Well, it is called a psycho-linguistic guessing game. It is a psycho-linguistic guessing game. You keep on guessing, or the reader keeps on guessing who, what, where, when, why, how. So he keeps guessing, and he takes the help of the words that are mentioned. He uses his background knowledge of grammar. He uses his knowledge of vocabulary. He also brings his past knowledge about that subject. If the subject is about, for instance, if the subject is on social studies, science, or if it is on communication skills, the reader always tries to bring his background knowledge to the text so that he can understand it in a better way, based on his past experience, based on his previous experience. Fine. Well, different techniques are used for different texts. Among the general reading types, we have 4 types of reading. One is skimming, another one is scanning, third one is intensive reading, and the fourth one is extensive reading. Let me tell you, to use language proficiently, fluently, confidently, one should be a good reader. Because unless there is some input, how can there be a proper output? Unless I read something, how can I develop my vocabulary? How can I develop my knowledge of latest phrases and expressions? Because English keeps borrowing words from different languages, and every day we see a new word. For instance, recently I read a word that is textrovert and webtrovert. Well, we know the words introvert and extrovert. Introverts are people who are inferior, people who are not very outgoing, and extroverts are people who are outgoing, people who are very easily mingling. Well, these 2 words were recently mentioned in one of the national newspapers. Textrovert, webtrovert. So these people, they always text messages. They always type messages. So that means instead of speaking, they write more. So whether it is reading, whether it is speaking or writing, one should be reading more. One should keep reading. different kinds of texts. And if you feel like, well, I don't have time for reading, I read only for my examinations, competitive exams or academic exams. And in this busy life, where do I have time for reading? At least read a newspaper, read a standard newspaper. And don't miss on reading such kinds of standard newspapers. Fine. As I told you, skimming is reading only for general information. It's reading only for general information. For example, if you see a newspaper, when you skim the newspaper, you just read the headlines in the newspaper. It's only superficial reading. You don't read everything about a particular article, general details. When it comes to scanning, you scan each word that is mentioned there. For example, there is a big list of time, there is a timetable of flights. There are about 50 flights mentioned on a page. Now your eyes straight fall on flight number 1, 2, 3, beginning or departure at Hyderabad, arrival at Delhi, duration, fare, and so on and so forth. So in a big list of flights, you specifically scan the flight that you are searching for, the particulars about that flight, departure, arrival timings, fare, concession, all these things. So scanning is that. And the third type of reading is intensive reading. Well, usually research scholars, they do intensive reading. They select a particular topic, they go on reading about the topic intensively. So their focus of reading is particularly a topic. And the fourth one that I mentioned is extensive reading. Reading extensively, well, wherever you lay your hands on, you read that. For example, it can be the wrapper of a chocolate. It can be just a flyer or a pamphlet. It can be anything. Well, being an English faculty, I do that. So wherever I lay my hands on, I keep reading something or the other, because that's how we acquire new phrases and expressions. That is how we develop the art of using the language for different occasions, different purposes. Okay, so if these are the four different reading types, depending on the text, use which type of reading you want. Are you just giving it a glance? You skim the text. By skimming, for example, you want to purchase a book. You go to a bookstall, you want to purchase a book, or there is a book exhibition. When you take a look at the book, you actually skim the book. You don't scan it. You just read the blurb of the book, who is the author, what is his experience, what are the contents of the book. So you give it a glance, and depending on that skimming, you will decide whether to buy the book or not. Well, scanning, as I told you, for different purposes, such as maybe you are searching for a particular flight, or you are searching for a particular rule in a rule book. Imagine you have a rule book and you are searching for a particular rule to claim insurance for the money that you have spent. So you will go to that particular page, read those paras, read those rules and regulations, terms and conditions very carefully. What are the ifs and buts in that? What are the do's and don'ts in that? Whether you are eligible for claiming that money or not, you scan all those things there. So you will use scanning technique for particular specific information. And yes, one should also be an extensive reader. At least one should try to become an extensive reader. And I'm sure gradually you will develop that interest, you will develop that love for reading. First of all, read for pleasure. Make reading an easy habit, or a sort of favorite favorite pastime. Then you will start acquiring the information that is mentioned in the text. Then you will start enjoying it. Then you will start loving it. Because when you read a text, the text speaks to you. It directs you. It instructs you. It suggests you. It helps you in various ways. It gives you ideas. It tells you how to go about. And it also helps you in your problem solving and decision making. Various ways. It motivates you. It inspires you. It gives you the confidence. It boosts your confidence levels. It helps you to overcome your stress. All that. For example, recently I was reading a book on soft skills, and the entire book is on how to develop confidence levels, how to overcome stress, So select books of your interest, select topics of your interest, and keep reading. Even in a newspaper, you need not read everything that is mentioned. If you feel like economics is a boring area in reading in the newspaper, select articles of your interest. It can be on sports, it can be on cricket, it can be on politics if you love politics. It can be on general current affairs if you like that. But one should be a reader to develop language skills, to develop the confidence in writing, the confidence in speaking. One should be a reader. Fine. Now, after knowing the types of reading, I would like to throw light on, I would like to focus on what other types do we have in addition to this. Well, the other type of technique is SQ3R. The other type of technique is SQ3R. By the word SQ3R, what I mean to say is survey, question, read, recite, review. When you survey a question or when you survey a piece of text, you will try to know the nuances of it, the highlights of it. Because when you want to read something, first of all, you will go to the text and you will see what is the text about. Is it of my interest? Do I enjoy reading it? Do I have anything beneficial to take from it? For example, it is the interview of a celebrity. If you like the celebrity and if you feel like the words are important, the expressions or phrases and expressions will be useful for you in your spoken communication, written communication, and if you feel like that particular celebrity, his answering will be interesting, it will be useful, then you will definitely go there to read it. So that is nothing but surveying the text. You survey the text. You just see whether that is an useful piece for you or not. And depending on that, you will go ahead whether to read it or not to read it. Fine. Now coming to question. Throughout your reading, you keep questioning yourself. Like, what? What is it about? When did he do this? Why does he say that? What makes him say that? Or how did he learn it? For example, usually celebrities, they talk several things about their past experiences. So they mention various interesting facts, interesting particulars and details about who, what, why, where. And since we look up to them as our role models, as exemplary ideals, obviously we will be interested more to know about that. What sort of decisions they took in times of crisis? How did they overcome failure in their life? What made them winners? And at times we also feel like, yes, I must do this. So questioning oneself while reading the text makes it much more interesting, makes it much more communicative and interactive, and makes it clear and easy for us or for the reader to follow the particulars mentioned. It shouldn't be like only the mind reading, only the eyes reading, and the mind is wavering somewhere. That's what teachers usually say, that body present, mind absent in the classroom. Only our eyes read there, but our mind is actually wavering somewhere, wandering somewhere, in some fantasy, some dreamland. So that's where some of these readers always go for regression. By the word regression, what I mean to say is, again and again they go back to that same line and read it, and then go back to the same line and read it, because it is only their eyes that are reading, their mind is actually not reading it. So one should not be such a kind of reader. That's where we waste time. That's where we actually lose interest of reading it, and that's where if it is a competitive exam, even the pressure phenomenally builds up, because when you are actually not doing that focused reading, even pressure builds up at times when the time limit is very short, especially in examinations. So never give scope for regression. By the word regression, I mean to say repetition, again and again, again and again, or going back to the same sentence again and again. Fine. So survey, question. Now in the 3 R's, what I mean to say is read, recite, review. So read the text, and by the word recitation, what do we recite? Usually we recite prayers, we recite poems, we recite songs, the lyrics of songs. So if you find anything interesting, if you find anything important and useful in the text, never ever forget to recite those words, recite those expressions, because those expressions have to be used in practical communication, in regular day-to-day communication. Then the word becomes your property. Then that phrase or expression will become your property, your property. And read, recite. The final thing that I said was review. Review is a sort of preview. Well, we all take printouts, and before we take a printout on computer, we always go to the text and check for errors in the text. We will try to edit the text. Well, in the forthcoming session on writing skills, I will tell you how to edit a text, what needs to be edited in a text. Well, just like we take a preview of the text before we take a printout, in a similar fashion, we will have to review the text for the gist, for the essence, for the summary, in a nutshell or in a capsule. So what does it say? What is the overall message of this text? What do you understand by this complete text? It can be a story, as I told you, it can be an article, it can be an interview, or it can be a particular passage, reading comprehension passage, especially in examinations. Even in multinational companies, or wherever you go, whether it is government jobs or private jobs, reading comprehension test is one of the most important tests. That's one of the most important tests nowadays, because they will test your reading skills in the given time, to know your reading skills, to know your knowledge of understanding the passage. For instance, now that we are talking about comprehension passages, what sort of questions are encountered in these passages? Some of the questions are direct questions, where the facts are directly mentioned in the passage. So you need not actually read each. You need not actually do a sort of intensive reading for that, because the facts are very much visible. The facts are very much available in the passage. Some of the questions are indirect questions. For instance, some of the tricky questions are, what do you think is the actual message of this passage, or what is the best theme that is mentioned in the passage? If you were the author, what title would you choose for this passage? These kinds of questions. These are indirect, which will test your global reading skills. Reading skills are again local reading. You also do global reading. You read between the lines to know the indirect meaning, reading between the lines. So yes, this is what one should understand. And some of the passages also test, some of the questions are extrapolative questions. They are even beyond the passage. What would be the consequences of this decision? What would be the outcome of this decision, as mentioned in the passage? So these are imaginary, hypothetical kinds of questions. Well, those kinds of questions are rarely asked, but at least factual questions one should be aware of. indirect questions, global questions one should be aware of. And never forget to read. When you read, maybe in the beginning you can read the sentences loudly, but over a period of time, gradually try to become a silent reader. Silent reading is the best reading. A mature reader, proficient reader, always reads the sentences, reads the phrases and expressions silently, very silently, so that he will understand the gist in a nutshell or in a capsule. So viewers, that's all about reading skills. I have explained the importance of reading. I have explained the types of reading. I have also given some of the tips and techniques of reading. And do not forget to execute, to implement and incorporate all these tips and techniques. And be a proficient reader. Try to love reading. First of all, start reading for pleasure, then you will gradually become a reader to acquire information, to know the information. And that's all we have in this session. And let me mention that a good reader is a good writer, and a good writer is a good reader. You want to become a proficient speaker, be a good reader. You want to become a proficient writer, be a good reader. I wish you all success. Thank you for watching the program.